guys, my name is Anna-Clare. I'm a second year international development student at University of Leeds, and I'm going to talk a bit about the Leeds for Life funding, which you may have heard a little bit about already, but otherwise I'll talk you through it a little bit. First I'll just tell you a bit about my degree and stuff. So, international development, why did I choose it? I really loved the kind of human aspects of geography when I was studying A-level. And I was never really a big fan of like rivers and cliffs and everything. So international development at Leeds kind of embodied everything that I loved in geography, and that's why I picked it. So what I find really interesting about development is just the fact that it's about how kind of countries and cultures have effectively changed over time, and the way in which we measure development, which is always very different depending on kind of where you're from and who you are. So this map here shows a kind of general idea of how we see development in the world today, which is this notion that the north and kind of blue areas are the kind of wealthy, more developed parts of the world, and the red areas are the less developed parts. And this is quite a problematic view in general, because it kind of gives us this notion that where we're coming from in the West is actually quite a superior place, and the idea that we don't actually have kind of things to work on as ourselves. So if you look, for example, in the second map, which is the map that we usually get shown and we're kind of brought up around, some of these superiority complexes are kind of shown in a way, because if you look at the sizes of, for example, Europe and America, here in this second one, we're a lot bigger, and we kind of make ourselves seem like we're at the centre of the world, whereas having, let's say, Philippines at the centre of the world might make our map look entirely different. So this is relevant because that's what I'm sort of interested in with regard to America and Cuba, which I'll talk to you guys about a bit later, so bear that in mind. But so Leeds for Life is a fund programme which we have here at the university, which effectively offers you money to go and develop yourself as a person, to kind of further your degree, and to kind of just, I don't know, give you skills that you can then take forward into your employment or whatever you decide to do in life. And it's really useful if you're not someone that feels like you want to take a whole year abroad. Like I did take a gap year as well, but if you're not wanting to do that, it's something that's really nice to have alongside your degree as well, because obviously you've got like 4 months every summer which you can spend travelling and everything, so you don't necessarily have to travel with this particular fund, but it's really useful. So I was one of these lucky people and I actually got £500. This was my kind of response, but it's actually my friend Abby. And I got £500 to go and kind of understand Cuba better as a culture. And I was really interested by Cuba because of what I was saying in terms of the maps, because I don't know if you guys follow the news much, but there's quite a lot going on between the US and Cuba at the minute, just in terms of this relationship in the past where Cuba's kind of being completely cut off in terms of trade from America, and this whole dynamic of where Cuba is placed in the world, which is right there on the Caribbean islands and quite close to comfort for America, and America has a long history of imposing its ideas on Cuba. So Cuba, as that tiny little country that you can see there, has been somewhere that's kind of actually stood up to this massive powerhouse, America, and been like, you know what, actually we're not going to take your ideas on board and we're going to do our own thing. So I was kind of interested about finding out more about that. And so my project was in 3 kind of aspects really, and I'm going to talk more about the first bit, but it was a 2-week kind of political camp which I went on, which was organised by the government of Cuba, which was about learning about the Cuban Revolution. And then I was also trying to set up a link between our university here in Leeds and a Cuban university and create some kind of ongoing friendship there and exchange of ideas. Because I think one of the things that's quite hard from Cuba's perspective, I guess, is that a lot of the things that I was reading when I studied Cuba in my degree were quite from an American kind of Western perspective. So in actually being able to have this funding money and go to Cuba, I was able to kind of see it in a lot more of a direct perspective. And third was learning Spanish. But again, like what's really nice about the Leeds for Life Fund is you don't actually have to speak a language to do a project, and this was just kind of a bonus plus of being able to do this, that I bettered my languages. So these are some photos from the camp. It was a 2-week camp about 23 miles out of the capital. There are about 168 of us from such a range of ages. Like the youngest person was 16, I think, and the oldest was 67, and we were all basically coming together from about 18, 19 different European countries to learn a bit more about Cuba. So we had a lot of conferences in terms of Cuban history and economics, and there were really beautiful kind of cultural events that went on, dancing, kind of music and art and everything. And then on top of this we had kind of agricultural voluntary work, which we do in the mornings. This is one of my favourite days when basically the farmers weren't wanting women to use machetes because they thought that we were too weak. So I got a machete and I did it better than anyone else, and I felt really proud of myself. So yeah, but what's really interesting is, I guess, sorry, too fast. What actually I found probably most challenging is just the things that aren't planned in your project. So I think part of the skills that you develop in doing this kind of experience is that you really have to take the initiative to just kind of plunge into the unknown, like these guys were talking about before. And so it's about, I guess, the hardest thing is having that initial idea of what you kind of think you might do, and then just really going for it. Because actually, probably my best part of the whole experience was living in the capital for like 5 weeks after I'd actually gone on the camp. And I met like a really, really lovely woman who then became like one of my best friends, who was like a drumming teacher. And I had drum lessons, and she introduced me to this whole kind of community of like different artists and poets, and I just had a really amazing time just getting really comfortable and like living in the capital. And like, again, like those kind of skills are just really invaluable in terms of when you do want to be employed later, although I don't like thinking of it in terms of employment, but like if you take the time yourself to go and put yourself in that kind of environment, to have to completely kind of establish yourself where you don't know anyone, where you don't speak the language, etc., etc., it does just give you a lot better idea of kind of who you are as a person and your kind of cultural beliefs, because you're being exposed to loads of different things all the time. And so inevitably then I guess when you do look to go into the world of work, you're just better equipped to deal with all kinds of things that I think I can probably now better deal with stress of things going on, like when you first arrive in a country and you've got to somehow navigate your way to where you're staying or whatever, and you don't necessarily have good directions, that kind of thing. And just in all aspects really. But I think for me, like the most important thing to take into consideration is, I guess, I feel like just being at uni already, there's such a lot of pressure for us all to kind of narrow down what you want to be doing all the time and like focus on who you're going to be and what you're going to do. And I think there is a bit of an idea that you kind of just have to get your degree sorted and go out into the world of work immediately, when things like travelling are actually just beneficial in all aspects. So I really would urge you guys just to take any opportunities that come your way, because like it's not an indulgence or something that you're just doing for yourself. It's actually making you better equipped to just face all aspects of life in general. So that was my last slide really, which is just to take all opportunities that come your way.